Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, July 12th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Today we're going to be taking a look at a different lens and perspective on the midterm bill that Donald Trump just passed roughly a week ago, 2 weeks ago really, talking about a number of different things that are going to be taking place after the midterm elections. Now, Donald Trump and the Republican Party know that this one big, beautiful bill is as unpopular as ever. The majority of the nation disapproves of its passing, and generally speaking, the American public is not on board with stripping away health care and changing requirements across a number of different government subsidies that would deem millions of Americans ineligible for things that they were eligible under the Biden administration and in some cases, Donald Trump's first term. But the planning and the scheduling of when some of these decisions in the recent bill take effect are very interesting, to say the least. Very clearly, the White House and congressional Republicans were calculated in how they made this assessment. They decided that they would pass this bill today, but it wouldn't take place in terms of actual tangible effects until after the 2026 midterm elections. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense from a political perspective as to trying to mitigate losses in the upcoming midterm elections. The Republican Party has known that this is a liability. They've been looking at the approval rating polls on it with 60 to 65 to some cases 70% of Americans really souring on this piece of legislation that Donald Trump is seeing as probably one of the biggest accomplishments, not just of this term, but potentially both terms by the time he leaves office. And a big reason for that is because this is a very substantive bill. Although it was rushed to the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives, it ultimately was a very big piece that Republicans had been counting on to potentially do a lot of benefit for them throughout the later years coming in 2026, 2027, 2028, and very long term. But Donald Trump and the Republican Party, as I said, wanted to ensure that especially on the bills related to healthcare, Medicaid, things along those lines, is that they actually delay the implementation. On the baseline, it seems, at least from surface level, that this is just because it takes a while to implement some of the effects of this bill, that it takes a while to coordinate with HHS and other different organizations across the federal government to ensure that when you are making this decision, that it just comes in a year or 2 years to give people time to make decisions around how implementation will be done and how you will actually make the conscious decision to remove people from having access to healthcare, access to SNAP benefits, access to a variety of different things that they already have access under the Biden admin and this first few months of the Donald Trump administration. But beyond that, too, the electoral benefit for Trump and the Republican Party is that voters won't actually see the real impact of this implementation. In some cases, it's going to take as long as the upcoming 2028 presidential election to that effect where, if Donald Trump and the Republican Party end up being so unpopular that in 2028, someone like Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance lose the election, they can eventually blame the Democrats for the outcome of a bill that they passed in 2025. And so this isn't anything that we've seen new necessarily to the federal government. Time and time again, especially on the Republican side, major pieces of legislation don't actually take effect until later on down the line, which means that it gives the political party coverage in the first 2 years of an incumbent administration to say that these things aren't taking place until after the midterms, giving voters more of a reason to maintain the status quo, to vote for the incumbent party, and giving voters less of a reason to find said incumbent party as unpopular. We really saw that too with the Affordable Care Act, although it had a very direct impact on those 2010 midterm elections. But 2026 has really been the fixation for Donald Trump and the White House. They know that with an unpopular bill, they have to defend its honor to the American public. People are not going to take it easily. And they're being careful. Again, it's a very convenient timeline insofar that it really does implement right in the beginning of 2027. By the time the voters have made their conscious decision around the 2026 midterms, they might not have these Medicaid cuts and thus might have made a different decision had the cuts been implemented earlier on. There are plenty of Republican districts, especially looking at the 2024 House results, specifically to states like California and New York, where Republicans represent massive parts of constituencies that are on Medicaid and are on SNAP, that are on federal assistance, that might have these things revoked after a bill that their representative decided to pass. And knowing how close the vote was, it was every single vote. We saw that it took hours upon hours because the holdouts from the House Freedom Caucus, and in many cases because they didn't think it did enough, stripping away, different opportunities for the American public. But regardless, because of how narrow the vote was, almost every single representative will have to directly answer to their constituents, Democrat, Republican, Independent alike, as to why they made this decision. And I think it's a bit of overconfidence from the GOP even passing this bill in the first place. Obviously, it's unpopular, but looking at the 2024 election results, I'm not super confident that the Republican Party will be in a good enough position that they maintain the House majority. I've been saying this from the beginning. The House majority is so slim for the GOP, the Democrats are near guaranteed a pickup. But the question isn't just if Democrats pick up the House, they will win control of the House of Representatives. But it is that this one big beautiful bill will loom over the heads of Republicans as they run for re-election in competitive districts, and even in some cases some more solid Republican districts that will see direct impacts of this bill. You will already find, in the state of Maine, you already found that all of these solar projects and a lot of these decisions just overnight had been completely changed. That it took a July 4th signing of a bill that now you're seeing a week later, all of a sudden everyone's halting all these projects because they know the federal government will not be there to subsidize the jobs, there to subsidize the projects that might even be midway that will be just completely abandoned because the Republican Party and Donald Trump's White House has decided that that is the way to go moving forward, especially in things related to clean energy and renewable energy. You're going to find that there's going to be a very direct impact in some areas that were overwhelming in their support for the incumbent president. And so looking at 2024 in comparison to what we might expect for 2026, you can really start to map it when you just change the election results editing by margin. Let's say the entire electorate shifts by roughly 5. For context, in 2024, the GOP won the national popular vote by about 2 points nationwide, which means you shift it over by 5, you get to about where Democrats are in the generic ballot, about a 3-point lead on average nationwide. That brings Democrats to about 230 seats in the House of Representatives. 230 seats is about 5 off from where they were in 2018. So to think that Democrats could be in an even better position if they get a 2018 type of margin, for context, that was a Democrat +8, +9 national environment, you're going to see that the House majority actually expands to even better than what Democrats were in 2018, at 238 seats in the House of Representatives. And it doesn't just extend there. When you're taking a look at what happens in the 2026 Senate elections too, Republicans are going to have to defend their decisions coming down to voters in a number of key and crucial battleground states. For instance, in Maine, that has become particularly interesting for a lot of Democrats as they try to field a very strong statewide candidate in this state. It's been difficult for them, to say the least. But ultimately, they're going to find that looking at who's decided to run, looking at who's decided to get in and out of this race, you don't have many top-tier candidates, but somebody certainly can run and can fill this vacancy the Democrats are leaving open. And that's because Susan Collins, while she did not vote for the one big beautiful bill, absolutely did vote to advance this piece of legislation out of debate. In consequence, what you found is that getting it out of debate, preventing the filibuster from actually taking place, you're getting it to the floor. And then you can vote on it. And so just looking at where we are in terms of the Senate election in Maine and Senate elections across the country, Republicans are going to have to defend this piece of legislation, even if the timeline is more convenient than ever. Because the Democratic Party is already winning the messaging on this. They're winning across the country by convincing voters that this is a piece of legislation that is directly going to harm them. That's why voters don't like that. It's exactly about the 2010 type of strategy that the Tea Party and the Republican Party employed, where they took a lot of messaging around the Affordable Care Act that eventually was more popular and made it this huge deal for national Democrats and made Democrats go on the defensive. Why did you vote for a bill that 60% of the nation did not want to see implemented? And so what you saw was that the House went from 257 seats for the Democrats down to 193. And while I don't think that there will be as drastic of a change in 2026 as a 63-seat gain for the Democratic Party as Republicans saw in 2010, you might see some pretty substantive gains, especially in regions across the country and districts across the country that you might not otherwise have expected. And so that's what really is going to define the 2026 midterm elections. This bill, amongst many of the decisions that Donald Trump's administration are doing, is really throwing everybody for a loop. It isn't just throwing the voters, but it's also throwing these Republicans who might otherwise have been able to defend their actions or, in some cases, their inaction around the present-day administration, that in 2026, if it is as unpopular as it was in 2018, Republicans really are doomed. And I think that it will remind a lot of voters in 2028, too. I think the implications extend beyond the midterms as to what a Republican trifecta looks like. What does it look like when Republicans have control of governorships and have control of House elections and Senate races, and they're able to win all across the country? Does it look better for the average American? Well, if Democrats are saying that this one big beautiful bill does not do good for the average American, and the average American does agree with that assessment, well, Republicans aren't going to be on track to do that much better in elections. I think the big reason that Donald Trump won in 2024 was that the American public genuinely believed that Donald Trump's pathway forward was going to be the right one, that was going to bring prices down. It was going to save people's costs on healthcare and do no tax on tips and just overall improve the quality of life that the American public wanted to see and felt they did see at different periods of time that they could remember. Donald Trump did a lot of reminiscing, thinking about how things cost a lot less when he took office in 2016 in comparison to how much they cost in the day and age of COVID-19 and a surge in inflation under Joe Biden. That was the way that Donald Trump won his election. But as voters start to sour on this mindset, truly do believe that Donald Trump is actually doing the opposite of what he promised, the opposite of what he directly engaged with the American voters on, whether he was going to do peace in the Middle East, whether he was going to reduce the cost of living for the average American, whether he was going to protect different federal benefits that Donald Trump said Democrats were going to take away. All of these different things that Donald Trump is failing to accomplish and failing to really deliver on. And Democrats win the messaging on Medicaid cuts, winning the messaging on billionaire tax cuts, all these different things that make a direct impact. The American voter isn't going to like it. And so I think when it comes down to 2026, it will be a very interesting election. The Republicans will have to defend this very big bill, one that will remind a lot of voters exactly why Republicans lost the election in 2020 and why they might not want to vote for them in 2026. And so we'll see. It's going to be a lot of messaging, a lot of battling in battleground districts, in battleground states. But so far, Democrats are winning this battle. And the big, beautiful bill, despite having very convenient timing, might not overall work out for the Republicans in the 2026 midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.